And she said, "This one is from the children of the Hebrews." And then his sister, that is the sister of baby Moses, said unto the daughter of Pharaoh, "Shall I go and call for you a woman who will nurse for you from the Hebrews, and she will nurse the child for you?" And the daughter of Pharaoh said to her, "Go and walk." And she called the mother of the boy. And the daughter of Pharaoh then said to her, that is to the mother of Moses, "Walk with this child and nurse him for me, and I will give you payment." And the woman took the child and she nursed him. And the child was weaned, and she took it to the daughter of Pharaoh, and it became her son. And she called his name Moses, because she said, "I drew him up from the waters." I have a book in my office that I read a while back, and the title is really worth the whole book. It's just, the title of the book is Hanging on a Promise. Hanging on a Promise. And on the cover of the book, there is this cliff, and there's just this little protuberance from the cliff. You can just see the very edge of it. And it is overseeing the skyline of a metropolitan city. And there's not a picture of a human being hanging from the precipice of that cliff, but I think that the author intends for you to see yourself there. Hanging on a promise. I think it's an apt image. It's an appropriate analogy of the Christian life. Hanging on a promise. Listen, I don't think that we always realize this, but we live in a world that rejects God and rejects God's ways and rejects God's people. And in that reality, whether we realize that we live in it or not, all we can do, ultimately, is to hang on a promise. To be like a person hanging on the precipice of that cliff over the rest of the world. While the world rejects God and rejects his ways and rejects his people, we hang on a promise. Now, I know we don't always sense that. But didn't Jesus say something like this? Listen to these encouraging words. "If you were from the world would love its own. But because you are not from the world, on account of this, the world hates you." Sometimes it's difficult to remember that that's the reality the Christian lives in. A world that hates God, a world that hates God's ways, and a world that ultimately rejects his people. Sometimes when we go to a Christian university and we have our churches and we have our homes and we have our Christian friends, we get the false sense that the whole world is for us, when in reality, the Bible and Jesus tell us that the world is against us. It hates God, it hates God's ways, it hates God's people. And sometimes all we are really doing is dangling on the precipice of that cliff. We are hanging on a promise. Now some of you have already experienced this. You've had tremendous loss in your life, or you've had an ongoing battle with addiction, or just a sin that you cannot seem to shake, and you recognize how much is marshaled against us, whether you can see it or not. You realize things like Ephesians chapter 6, where Paul assures us that our battle's not against flesh and blood, but against the principalities and the powers of darkness. And you sense that tension, you sense that resistance. You sense that indeed all you can really do sometimes is just hang on a promise. Now, some of you maybe don't sense that, and maybe you haven't had those moments in your life yet where you experience tragic loss, the loss of a loved one, or just struggling in your faith. Maybe not to the level where you would say, "I'm just hanging on by a promise," like the cliff on the edge of a city. So I don't know where you're at with that tonight, but I can assure you, I'm not trying to scare you, but I can assure you that there are going to come moments in your Christian experience in which you will feel like you are hanging on the edge of that cliff. And I want to reassure you if you find yourself in that moment, and I want to reassure you, if you're already there, I want to reassure you, I want to comfort you, and if you're not there yet, if you don't sense that yet, I want to prepare you for that moment, hanging on a promise. And I think that Moses can actually help us understand as believers in the Lord Jesus Christ what it means to hang on a promise. There's something that a promise from God, there's something that it does to us. There's something that is effective about it. And I want to spend our time thinking about what a promise does in our lives. Now I got to set this up just a little bit with Moses. If it's been a while since you've cracked open the book of Exodus, remember that these are descendants of Abraham. Abraham way back in Genesis chapter 12. God has called Abraham to be sort of this agent of redeeming a fallen world, a world that's fallen into sin and death, and God has called up Abraham and his descendants to make things right in the world. And we know that Abraham's descendants, Isaac and Jacob and his 12 sons, become the nation of Israel. And at the opening of the book of Exodus, we see the Israelites there in Egypt. And there was a time in Israel's experience in Egypt when all was well, when the world wasn't against them, when the Pharaoh wasn't against them, when the Pharaoh recognized that indeed, if you bless the descendants of Abraham, God would bless you. But the narrator tells us that another Pharaoh arises, one who didn't know these descendants, he didn't know the ancestors of these Israelites. And the new Pharaoh sees these Israelites as a real threat to Egypt. In fact, what he's worried about is that as their population expands and grows, that when Egypt is attacked, when it goes to war, its enemies, its foes, will marshal their forces with the Israelites, and Egypt will then perish. And so this new Pharaoh, as we see in Exodus chapter 1, tries to find different ways to curtail the population of Israel. The first thing that he does is he tells the Egyptian handmaidens, those who sort of act as those who come to the bedside of Hebrew women to help them deliver babies, he wants to convince them, he tries to convince these Egyptian handmaidens to if the woman has a male baby, that they should kill it, but if it's a female, then you can let it live. But these handmaids, the Egyptian handmaidens, they're afraid of Yahweh. They believe some things about Yahweh, about Israel's God, and so they're unwilling to do it. So Pharaoh goes to even more extreme measures, and he institutes what we would call today as infanticide. And it's very cold, and it's very harsh. If you look at the end of chapter 1 in Exodus 1:22, he says, look, he tells all the people in Egypt, if you see a newborn Hebrew baby, and it's a boy, you need to toss it into the Nile River. It's a process of infanticide. And it's against that backdrop, it's in that resistance, it's in that kind of world where you have someone and you have a nation that despises God's people, despises God's ways, and has enslaved his own people. It's against that backdrop, you see, that Moses comes on to the scene. And at the heart of Exodus and at the heart of Moses' story is this promise. And this promise does something to Moses. It does a number of things to him. And I want us to look at these because we too are hanging on by a promise, whether we see it or not. We don't live as people enslaved in Egypt as literal slaves, but again, as Jesus warns us, we live in a world that essentially hates us. We live in a world in which the God of this world, the God of little g, that is Satan, that he very much is overseeing a number of things, and he is against us. We are hanging on a promise. And in the midst of that, in the midst of that resistance, in the midst of that struggle, as we're hanging on the precipice of that cliff, what does this promise do to us in the midst of that? That's what I want us to focus on. And the first thing that I would mention, the first thing that I would take note of is that, listen, this promise produces faith in the face of darkness. This promise that Moses and his parents had, that we're going to see, that we see here in chapter 2, it produces faith in the face of darkness. Now there is a text lying underneath this one. Don't go looking for it, but it's there, yes? The promise that ancient Israelites have in mind here, the promise that Moses' parents have in mind here, a promise that prompts them to disobey Pharaoh and hide their newborn son it's what we find in Genesis chapter 12 and in Genesis chapter 15. It's that promise that Yahweh gives to Abraham, that through you, Abraham, and through your descendants, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. And I think in this same context, I have explained what blessing means and what it doesn't mean. Yes? That when Yahweh tells Abraham that all these are going to be blessed through you, it doesn't mean everyone's going to get a Lexus. Yes? It's not like that license plate that I still see around town sometimes, where it's be blessed and the L is the Lexus sign. Right? It's the blessing of redemption. Right? It's the blessing of forgiveness from sin. It's the blessing of overcoming the forces of darkness. It's the blessing of one day standing upon the world stage upon Judgment Day and being declared righteous in God's sight. That blessing was to come through Abraham. But Yahweh made another promise to Abraham after Genesis chapter 12. He tells Abraham in Genesis 15, look, your descendants are going to be enslaved for about 400 years. He tells Abraham, you're going to die a good old age. Everything's going to be okay with you. But your descendants are going to be enslaved for about 400 years. But there's going to come a time, Yahweh promised Abraham, where I'm going to deliver those people. I'm going to deliver those people by pouring out judgment upon the nation that oppresses them. I'm going to pour out judgment upon the nation that enslaves them. Those are the promises. The promise to Abraham. The blessing of salvation. Freedom from enemies, my God, judging those enemies. Those are the promises, you see, that Moses' parents are hanging on to. When Moses is born, they recognize that there's something unique about him. I'm not exactly sure what the narrator means in verse 2 when he says that she looked at him and she saw that he was good looking, that he was beautiful. You know, the Bible doesn't spend a lot of time talking about the physical appearance of its main figures. Classical Greco-Roman literature does that a lot, yes? Homer spends copious amounts of pages describing the shoulders of a person and the biceps of a person, right? So I don't think that this is meant to talk about the literal physical appearance of Moses, right? All mothers think that their babies are beautiful, right? Yes. My mother once claimed that when I was growing up, I was strikingly handsome. Yes, that's right. So it's not about physical appearance. I'm not sure why you laugh at that, but it's not about physical appearance so much as that with these promises in mind, Moses' parents, with the promises to Abraham ringing in their ears, they notice there's something about this child that has a connection to that promise. And it prompts them to disobey the orders of Pharaoh, to not have this child thrown into the river, and to hide them for as long as they can. And apparently, these promises were common knowledge in the household of Moses' parents, because notice what his little sister does. We later learn that her name is Miriam. What does she do? She goes and she hides from a distance after her mother has gently placed Moses in this little miniature ark. And she's made it in such a way that it will float down the Nile River. And here's this little sister wanting to see what's going to happen. The promise that had been given to Abraham produced faith in Moses' parents and in Moses' sister, even in the face of darkness. That's what a promise from God does. And we know that all the promises of God relate to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's what the promise of the gospel does in us when we hear it. I don't know how this happens, but when people hear the gospel, when some people hear the gospel, it produces faith in them. When some people hear that there was a person sent from heaven by God the Father, that it's God's own Son, that he was sent into the world, that he lived this impeccable, blameless, sinless life for me, that he takes the penalty for my sin upon a cross, a Roman cross in the 1st century A.D., and that 3 days later he was raised from the dead, and that by faith in his name I can be made right with God both now and for all eternity. Some people hear that and it produces faith in them. They hear that promise, and in the face of their own darkness, in the face of their own sin and the powers of darkness, it produces faith in them. Now, I don't know why it produces faith in some and not faith in others. I can't explain that. I've read the Bible a lot. I've read a few books. But I cannot explain to you why it is that some people hear the promise of the gospel. Some hear the promise of Jesus' death and resurrection in their place, and they believe. It produces faith in them, even in the face of darkness. And for others, it's just an inspiring story at best, just one more ancient myth at worst. I don't know why that happens. There is a mystery to it. So I can't subscribe to you tonight that the promise of the gospel produces faith in everybody that hears it. But it does produce faith in some, even in the face of darkness. What does the promise of the gospel do for us when we are hanging on only by that promise? It produces faith in us. In this story of this infant Moses, I hear echoes of Jesus' own story, yes? His life, too, as an infant is threatened. Go back and read Matthew chapter 2. Herod is angered by the fact that these magi come and they say, "Where's the one who's been born king of the Jews?" And Herod, he wants to hold on to his power, and so he orders infanticide, right, of all those 2 years old and younger. And God warns Joseph to take Jesus, get this, to Egypt, right? Sort of literary irony there. And to hide Jesus until it's safe to come back into the promised land. And Mary and Joseph do so because they recognize that there is something about this child that fulfills those promises that were given to Abraham. So you see, the promise that Moses' parents are holding on to, and the promise that Joseph and Mary in the New Testament hold on to, these are not just kinds of one another, they're connected to one another. Because it's in Jesus that you finally get that redemption that was promised to the world, that was promised through Abraham's descendant. And that kind of promise, the promise of the gospel, listen, it produces faith in some, not in all, but it produces faith in the face of darkness. Paul says in Romans 10:17 that faith comes by hearing, and hearing the word of Christ. What exactly is a promise? If we're going to spend the next several weeks talking about promise, it might be good to define that, right? The promise of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ is not, I would subscribe to you, is not a message invented by people. It's a message from heaven. It's an assurance from the lips of God to our ears. It comes from outside of us. It's not inherently in us. And we have to look outside of ourselves. We have to look outside of ourselves. Listen, when the darkness closes in and you sense that the world indeed hates you, and you sense the power of sin, and you sense the power of the evil one, and you sense the power of temptation, and everything else, all you can do is hang on to the promise, and you cannot listen to yourself, you cannot listen to other voices, you have to hear the promise that comes from heaven. It's the assurance that comes from heaven. It's a spoken word. God wants us to understand it. He wants us to meditate upon it, to dwell upon it, to hold on to it as if it is all that we have. Because it is. I sometimes hear that proverb or that word from Job, and later Paul quotes it in the pastoral epistles, right? Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return. The only thing that you get in life that you can actually take with you out of this life is the promise of the gospel. And that promise, when we hear it from God's lips to our ears, it produces faith even in the face of darkness. But I would also subscribe to you that based upon this passage here in Exodus chapter 2, and the larger story of Moses, and really the larger story of Israel in the Old Testament, the promise, this may sound kind of strange, but the promise hurts. What does the promise do to us? I would put it this way: the promise produces the pain of expectation. The promise of the gospel, the promise from God, it produces the pain of expectation. The Bible talks a lot about this. It oftentimes compares the fulfillment of God's promise in Christ to a mother, expected mother, waiting to give birth. I'm getting old now, and so I can't remember what all I shared and which I didn't use. But I have 5 kids. I've been in the delivery room 5 times. And as a side note, I always tell some of my male students things they should say and should not say in that delivery room, right? What you should say is you're doing great. What you should say is going to be worth it. What you should not say is sort of philosophize and say, as soon as he's born, he's going to start dying. Don't say something like that. Just speaking from experience. Thankfully, my wife is a very forgiving person. And she understood what I was trying to say. She just said, I think we should have a conversation right now. But my point is that this promise from God, the promise of the gospel, it produces this pain of expectation. It's a mixed bag, isn't it? On the one hand, it creates all this hope of things to come, all the goodness of God to come in the person of Jesus Christ, but then there's the reality of life. These two things are like oil and water. These two things are like these opposites that butt heads with one another and makes life so difficult. The promise, what does the promise do to us? It produces the pain of expectation. What would have been easier for Moses' parents here? What would have been easier? What would have been easier was to let go of the promise ringing through their ears, to see nothing significant about baby Moses, and go ahead and have him tossed into the river. But the promise, you see, produces the pain of expectation. We don't oftentimes think of the gospel and faith and Jesus as painful, but we should, shouldn't we? Jesus again and again and again tries to warn us of what the Christian experience, what a true Christian experience will look like. He says it will be like picking up a cross and following me. He tells parables about setting down and make sure that you count the cost so that you know you have enough to finish. Again and again, he talks about the hurt and the pain that's produced in following him. It's the pain produced by the promise of the gospel itself. It's the pain of expectation. Imagine living a life with no expectations, with no hope. Would it be dark? Yes. But it would be quite simplistic. I actually tried a thought experiment about a year ago. I decided that I would try to live for a week like a Stoic philosopher. Okay, I don't know why people invite me to speak at this stuff, but here I am, right? So I decided I'd have this thought experiment, right? And Stoic philosophers, ancient Stoic philosophy, was basically just this approach to life in which you don't get too high, you don't get too low, you stay on an even keel, you don't have good emotions or bad emotions, you don't have hope, you don't have disappointment, you just you're like a punching bag, and you just say, if you want to give me another, I'll take another, right? And in some ways, it does simplify life. You have no expectations of yourself. You have no expectations of those around you. And you have no expectations of God. It does not produce the pain of expectation. But of course, it was just an experiment. And the promise of the gospel cannot be thrown away like that. And if you're going to cling to the promise of the gospel like a person hanging off that cliff, just know this. What is it going to do? Well, that promise is going to produce faith, but it's also going to produce the pain of expectation. I sometimes like to think of that scene from the third Batman movie. I don't know, what do we call it? Dark Knight Rises? What is that? Is that right? With Bane? All right. So I don't understand Bane, but I do know this. He understands something about the pain of expectation, because when he imprisons Batman, he imprisons him in this sort of bored-out cistern, right, in which there's no way out except to basically climb your way out. And you can see the blue sky every day. And there is this pain of hope. It's this pain of expectation that someday, somehow, I might actually get out of here. And that's what the promise of the gospel does. Somehow, some way, Jesus is going to make all things right. In my heart, in my life, in my friend's life, in my family's life, in the life of the world. Justice and righteousness are someday going to reign. The only reason I believe that is because the gospel promises that. And so therefore it creates this pain of expectation. Moses' parents understood that. Moses' sister understood that. The Israelites would understand that. Later on in chapter 2, at the end of chapter 2 here, what do the people begin to do? They have the promise to Abraham ringing in their ears. And they begin to cry out to God. And the narrator says that Yahweh remembered his covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And he sends Moses to deliver the people. It's not that God forgot what he promised. It's just that God works upon his own schedule, you see. And when it says that God remembered, it means that now he is going to enact, he's going to act entirely upon the promise that he made. But until he decides to do that, you see, what the promise of the gospel does is produce the pain of expectation. Hoping for an end to sin, hoping for an end to death, hoping for an end to injustice. It is more painful to hope than it is not to hope. I think that's a part of what Jesus means when he says, if you're going to follow me, sit down and consider the cost. Consider the cost of hoping in my return in a world full of darkness and injustice. Think for a moment about how painful that's going to be. Think about how much ridicule you are going to face. Promise produces this pain of expectation. And we hang on to it as tightly as we can. Because on the one hand it produces faith in us, on the other hand it produces hope in us, and that hope hurts until we see all things made new in Christ. I would also note that in this narrative, what we see the promise doing in the life of Moses' parents, in the life of Moses, and in the life of Israel. Listen, the promise produces an opportunity. It's an opportunity for God to reveal himself. The promise produces an opportunity for God to reveal himself. God establishes a people who live with the painful expectation of him making good on his promises to Abraham. And he's carved out a space in the world, you see, in which here were these ancient Israelites. These were the only people on the planet living with the promise of redemption for the whole world through Abraham's descendants. And it creates sort of this space, if you will, this opportunity for God to come down and to reveal himself not just to his people, but to the whole world. To reveal himself in his power and in his wisdom, in his faithfulness, in in his righteousness. I mean, look who ends up rescuing Moses. Now, I don't know what Moses' mother was thinking when she put him in this little miniature ark. Is he going to be eaten by gators? Is he going to be swept away by the current? I don't know. But I know this, when she could no longer hide them, she had two choices. She could have just thrown them in, like Pharaoh ordered to do, or she could have this painful expectation that somehow, some way, in God's power, in God's wisdom, in God's righteousness, in his faithfulness, somehow, even though he did this river and he could drown, God would deliver him. And this creates an opportunity for God to reveal his wisdom and his power, because who is it that ends up delivering baby Moses? It's the daughter of Pharaoh. Pharaoh's own doom and fate is being sealed by one in his own household. God is defeating Egypt through Egypt. And so this promise that Israel is holding to creates an opportunity for God to reveal himself in his power, in his wisdom, in his righteousness, in his faithfulness. And the same thing happens in a grander way, on a greater scale in the life of Jesus Christ. In a similar way, this hope of the gospel, this promise to Abraham that was passed down to generation to generation to generation, and the prophets spoke about it, the psalmists spoke about it, this redemption for the nations. What that promise does in the first century is it creates this opportunity, it creates this space, if you will, at Golgotha, outside the gates of Jerusalem, for God once and for all to ultimately reveal his wisdom and his power and his justice and his faithfulness and his righteousness. And it looks as if all things have gone askew. It looks as if all things have gone haywire. It looks as if God has failed in his wisdom. He's been foolish. He has no power. And he's been unfaithful to his promise. And yet, in the death and resurrection of Jesus, it is just the opposite. And this promise creates this opportunity, right? The promise of Abraham and the prophets and the writers and those early Christians, those first disciples, and those women at his tomb. Now there's this opportunity for God to reveal himself. And that's what he does. When he raises Christ from the dead, what does he once and for all do? He shows the wisdom of his promise. He shows the power of his promise. He shows the righteousness of his promise. He shows his faithfulness unto his promise. In a crucified and risen Jesus. Listen, Pharaoh's daughter drew Moses out of a river. God raises his son out of a tomb. And in that moment, wisdom and power and righteousness and faithfulness are ultimately revealed. And what we find is that we're not just hanging on the precipice of that cliff just to an idea, just to a good thought, but we're hanging on to Christ himself. Because as Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians, Paul has become the power and wisdom and righteousness and sanctification from God. Everything that God promised his people, all the promises of God are yes in Christ. The promise of the gospel produces faith. Faith in Christ. It produces the painted expectation that Christ would return. And it produces an opportunity for God to reveal himself ultimately in Christ. That's what the promise of God does in the face of darkness. Moses understood that. His parents understood that. His sister understood that. May we too understand. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for your word. recognize its power, and we recognize its usefulness. We recognize that it is still powerful today. Father, we know that indeed we hang on a promise, the promise of the gospel that's fulfilled in your Son, Jesus Christ. And we also know this, that as tightly as we hang on, you hang on much tighter. That as Isaiah says, that you lift us up as wings like eagles, that you shelter us like a mighty fortress. Father, I pray that you would encourage these students tonight, whatever they have faced or are facing or will face, Father, may they hang on to the promise of the gospel. Because all that you promise, all the wisdom that we need, all of your faithfulness, and all the redemption from sin and judgment and hell itself is found in Jesus Christ, the one crucified and pulled out of the waters of death as our deliverer. May we trust in you, Lord Jesus. May we hang on to you.